I want to say hello to everyone as we are live now to the Congressman Keating's Nantucket Town Hall. We are joined tonight by Senator Julian Sear, who's going to moderate the event. Just a couple of things I wanted to go over before I handed it over to the senator. We're going to take questions in the order that they came in. I know a lot of the registries already gave us questions. We'll be connecting with the questioners to see if they want to ask their question live or if they just want to have Senator Sear ask it for them. If we get questions during the town hall, we will try to squeeze them in if time allows. If time does not allow, we'll take your question and we'll be sure to get you a written response. And with that, I'm going to introduce Senator Sear, who's the state senator for Cape Cod and the Islands. I believe you're the youngest member in your chamber. Is that correct, Senator? And,
I am so far.
And he's a Senate Assistant Majority Whip and chair of the Joint Committee on Mental Health, Substance Abuse, and Recovery. And he does a great job working with the Congressman's office on constituent issues and federal and state issues that sometimes kind of intertwine. So with that, Senator, and by the way, the senator is joining us tonight with his power out in Provincetown, and he's using his cell phone. So, you know, if we have any technical difficulties, it's not his fault. It's just the circumstances we're in.
Thanks, Jim, for that introduction. And I don't think we need to explain to Islanders what life is like, whether it be power or boat access or anything else, when you live on an island, or in my case, when you live on the Outer Cape. And thank you, Jim, for that introduction. Great to be with Congressman Keating and his team as we do actually several of these town halls across the region. This is our second town hall. The first was focused on Martha's Vineyard, and this is focused, of course, on Nantucket. I've always felt very strongly, and I know Congressman Keating shares this view, that we really need to make sure that we're paying attention to the unique needs of our island residents. And I think too often we will say, oh, the Cape and Islands, and sort of, you know, lump everything into sort of one bucket, when you actually look at the needs of each island is quite distinct. And that's something that I've certainly sought to do. And Representative Dylan Fernandez, who is tied up tonight, but is with us in spirit, he always aims to do. And we've got a remarkable congressman in Bill Keating, who is always looking out for the interest of Islanders. And you know, this town hall, I think, is just a further reflection of saying that he's going to make time for, you know, island specific concerns. So we're going to get into a whole conversation, and we're going to do it all remotely. Of course, we'd love to be in person gathering on the island. I certainly look forward to when I get to travel to the island, which we try to do every 6 weeks in normal times. And I know Bill feels the same way. Of course, these are unprecedented times and difficult times, very anxious time with 14 days to go before November 3rd. But wanting to make sure that we really set aside time for reaching out to our friends and our constituents on the island. So we're going to hear from the man of the hour in just a moment, but wanted to start with playing a video clip that shows, this is a video clip of Bill Keating questioning Secretary Mike Pompeo at a foreign affairs hearing. You know, and it really shows Congressman Keating questioning the secretary primarily around the president's use of an unsecured phone line. And this sort of highlights some of the work that, you know, as Islanders or folks here, you know, up in Massachusetts may not see. We wanted to start tonight's town hall just to give you a little snippet on something you may have not seen of Bill in action. So, Jim, let's roll the tape.
Won't walk away a single bit from what I said previously. Every government elected official has responsibility to comply with,
including the president, Mr. Secretary?
Every government official.
So who would tell him that under your organization?
Congressman, I don't have any comment on that. We all have a responsibility.
But excuse me, you know it, and it's true. If it is true, would you feel compelled to say, Mr. President, you got to change your phone? it's a security risk.
we're-
Wouldn't you at least do that for America?
I'll tell you this. I'll tell you this.
Can't do
Mike.
that for America? Come on now.
We're both great patriots. I think we share that. I'm going to do everything I can.
You wouldn't tell the president if he had an unsecure phone, hey, Mr. President, you got to get a new phone. You wouldn't tell him that? Why wouldn't you tell him?
I have managed for 16 months not to talk about conversations I've had with the president.
Well, have you had that conversation?
I do not intend to violate that principle today with respect to conversations between myself
Well,
and the president.
I'm going to take that, if you will, that you've never told the president, hey, you better get a new phone that's secure.
I can't account for how you'll take it. I can only tell you that
You can't account for how he'll take it?
I can't account for how
Who can?
You shouldn't construe the absence of a comment from me one way or the other. Know this, every time I see a security issue, I try to do my best to fix it, whether it's something that I got wrong or someone else made an error as well.
So there's just a little snapshot of Bill Keating in action as someone who, in his time since being elected in 2010, has really emerged as the leader and the voice on foreign affairs and defense issues in the Massachusetts delegation. Someone who's really brought that questioning, fighting spirit, actually since back in the days when he was first elected, actually serving in the Senate. He was younger actually than me when he was first elected to the state Senate, taking on hard fights there with leadership in the Senate at the time. And really this is the work that the congressman has done ever since. He is certainly a tremendous partner to my team. So much of the work that we do runs into challenges and issues at the federal level, and his crackerjack staff are always available, working in partnership on a whole host of issues. And he's been a real friend and supporter, and just someone who understands the unique needs of a place like Nantucket, that the island is not just, yes, it's part of this greater beautiful region, but that there are very specific challenges and needs and concerns that the island has that we need to work on at the federal level, that we need to work on the state level, certainly in partnership with municipal leaders and stakeholders and constituents. And so that is what tonight is about. So I'm going to turn it over to the man of the hour, Bill Keating, who is our congressman, who is a tireless fighter for the Cape and Islands and issues of justice, and want to introduce him. We're going to hear a few remarks from the congressman, and then we're going to get right into our questioning.
Julian, thank you so much.
You bet.
I think everyone knows the relationship that we have between your office and our office. We have each other's cell phone number. At a moment's notice, we talk back and forth on anything that's going on, and it's kind of seamless relationship that's necessary. And I think as we flesh out issues in this town hall meeting and after, we're going to see that the relationship between the federal and state government going forward, trying to clean up some of the difficult messes that have been created by this administration and some of the aftermath issues, we're going to have to work together even more. I was looking at that tape again and thinking, as I looked at it, frankly, that one of the real problems with this administration has been the fact that people won't speak up. This situation's been one where this administration has made decisions, taken actions that we've never seen in our country's history before, I don't believe. And the enablers that surround the president, I think, bear responsibility as well. When I look at the Senate in particular, and the Republicans there not speaking up, but the people that surround him, the people that have spoken up, aren't there anymore. Jim Mattis isn't there anymore. The people that just left, they were forced out or left. And as we're speaking today, this president's own FBI director, he's attacking his own FBI director because the FBI director said mail-in voting is safe. There's no threat of any terrorist activity that's involved in that. He's at odds with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff when he was making just off the cuff predictions of when we should, withdraw troops from Afghanistan in a way that they're in the midst of negotiations. It's one of the key leverage points we have, throwing that away and then perhaps leaving our soldiers there at risk by not being able to do the safety requirements there that I saw when we were leaving Iraq, protecting our troops. It's one of the most dangerous times. We've seen him with until recently, his two, doctors that were in charge of COVID response, Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx. He's been critical of both of them in a very harsh way. And he's even his allies. He's even attacking his attorney general who walked the plank for him because he's not coming forth with an investigation that is fabricated and one geared at his opponent and not the facts. And even the person we saw, Secretary Pompeo, attacking him for not releasing more classified documents and documents surrounding Hillary Clinton, documents that won't show anything, but that he is attacking him for not going forward with. So it continues. And that, what we saw in that clip really is part of the difficulty with this administration and dealing with the administration. We find ourselves now with the COVID-19 crisis. It's the largest, most serious non-military crisis we've had in our country in 100 years, at least. It's a situation where our response has failed, and we can get into some of those issues as it goes forward. And we can hopefully take how those issues affect Nantucket in particular and the unique needs of the island. So I'll talk about those issues and try and fit them in during the question and answer period. But I'd like to give the people the opportunity to go forward and start asking some questions.
Terrific. Let's get to it. So our first question comes from Jean Briskman. And Jean asks, as an authority on terrorism and national security, what do you, Congressman Keating, see as potential security risks and terrorist actions when Trump loses the election? If and when, and hopefully, I should say, how do you anticipate the federal government responding, actually both at the individual state level and then also national level?
Just the fact that that question has to be asked it's jaw-dropping. Because one thing in our history we saw time and time again is the peaceful transference of power. It's our hallmark. It's a hallmark of any democracy. As you look around the world, where we've given up much of our leadership position in the world, we've lost that moral authority when we're having this kind of discussion, when the president's talking about rigged election. So it's an important question because the president himself won't answer that question. It's an important question because it does surround, he's saying it in the midst of this election period that is so critical and important. It has so many ramifications domestically and internationally. He's saying it when John Bolton has said, and he's warned that Trump will not leave office gracefully. And he doesn't know whether he'll carry it to extreme, and he doesn't know what will happen. That's from his chief security advisor in the past. So what we're doing is this, where the federal authorities, and it's public now, are making some plans for election day itself. They're going to have a central control in the FBI center. They're going to work through U.S. attorneys' offices dealing with issues. They're going to have civil rights response, security responses available for any incidents that might occur during election day itself. After that, I do believe we'll have a transfer of power. I don't know how seamless that will be. I don't know how peaceful that will be. But the fact that there could be a period in the lame duck session that affects our security is a real concern. But to put it in perspective, what's been occurring before this is a real security concern. We've done things like leave our allies, troops on the ground in Syria without notifying them. We've pulled away from that historic coalition that's of allies, NATO allies in particular, where that's been fractured with the president's actions and undercut, which was one of our real strengths, a strength that Russia or China or any of our adversaries don't have. They don't have a coalition, and that's been undercut. We have nuclear threats that have expanded, and we have cyber threats that are very real. But I'll tell you this, we've been dealing with those during this period. I think they'll continue and we should be vigilant during the period of the lame duck session. What I'm concerned about is the testimony of FBI Director Christopher Wray to Congress. He warned us the greatest threat, terror-wise, is domestic. It's the far extreme right-wing white nationalists and militias that are there. And I'm concerned that after this election, during that period, that we have to be prepared with that. It sounds hyperbolic, or would have in the past, but put in perspective that there was an ongoing plot to kidnap and try with a militia trial and execute a sitting governor, and then of Michigan, and another one in the process of going forward with the governor of Virginia. These kind of concerns are real. So I think we, should always be on guard, and I think we will. The institutions are in place to do that. If other countries are going to try and take advantage of this period, but we have to be on guard domestically and prepared for that as well.
Yeah, certainly a sobering update, as is so much right now. So John Rich has a question, and actually I think I'm going to be reading all the questions, and if you are someone who asked a question and I call on you and want to ask the question, just chime in. But otherwise, for efficiency's sake, I've got the questions here and I'm going to ask them. So John Rich asks, what specific assistance can the federal government provide in regard to coastal resiliency? Good question. Mitigation measures may be hugely expensive, especially in a place like Nantucket. What funding, if any, is available from the federal government?
Well, this is a primary concern. I've been told that in the entire House, I have the most coastline of any congressional district, and with that affecting our standard, our way of life, with that affecting our one of our biggest industries, the tourism industry, with that affecting our environment and how we live. It's a real concern. The Cape Cod Commission has done sea level rise projections. They're real, and they're happening all the time. They're happening quicker than predicted. We're dealing and have been dealing in Nantucket with some of the effects of this. The dredging issue is more severe than it used to, and just a few years ago, hit a crisis level where the Steamship Authority, the Highline Ferry, they had about a 1 foot area of carry, and it was serious. They were saying they were going to have to shut down the lines. We didn't advertise that, but our office was able to move forward and get help immediately, transferring from one area to another, the Army Corps of Engineers, to do that emergency dredging. And indeed, they followed that up with $10.5 million of dredging with the East-West Jetties Rehabilitation Project. So these are important. A few years before that, we did Paulsup's Harbor and the town pier for dredging. These are real issues that affect not only the quality of life in Nantucket, but actually the economic life as well. So the costs, which were mentioned by John, those costs are real and sobering. If you're looking at the cost just in the next 30 years, it's forecast that the Cape and the island area has $7 billion coastal resiliency infrastructure cost just for the public assets that are there alone, not the private assets. That's a huge price tag in a very short period of time. When we're moving, we have a bill that we passed, and hopefully with the new administration, it'll be advanced on infrastructure. But it's going to be an infrastructure plan different than so many others. Not only will it expand broadband and look forward, but it's going to deal with a lot of the climate change issues. It's going to prioritize those issues. It's going to be an investment in technology and industry, so that, Julian, when you lose your power, I know we have the battery now in place in Provincetown, but that kind of technology is going to make an enormous difference. It's a huge game changer in terms of harnessing and storing solar power. And right now we have ongoing, which I've been very involved with for a few years now, the largest offshore wind project in the United States. So it's been threatened so many times, and by the Interior Department of this administration, we've moved, I think successfully keeping it alive. The capital's there, and we're going to hit the next stage next spring. So this is something that is a critical issue, but it's also, and this is a great opportunity for us in this district. Forbes magazine said that in the 2035 that the green industry, blue marine industry, however you want to categorize it, it's going to be expanding at double the rate of all other businesses in the United States. We have everything in place to be the hub of that. We have Woods Hole, we have SMass, University of Mass. We have Mass Maritime for engineering. We're using our community colleges now for training and educating people. I have a bill in that passed the House that will give money for that kind of training. So we have the workforce in place. So this will be a challenge for us, but it's also an opportunity for us. And it's something that this region of the state and this part of the country needs desperately to attract new, good jobs and to really be the Silicon Valley of marine industry. So there's many ways to look at it. We're dealing with it at all levels. The subcommittee I chair deals with, we're given the authority in foreign affairs for global environmental issues. So I'm working with colleagues around the globe already. One thing I wanted to do was get Greta Thunberg to come to the US. And it took months and months of planning, and she came by boat. She wouldn't get in an airplane. And I wanted her to have the ability to inspire us here by testifying in front of Congress the way she has so effectively in Sweden and in Europe and around the world. And I had her be joined by a young man, Benji Baker, his name was. He is one of the leaders of the conservative Republican student movement in the country, but he's also very strong on the need to deal with climate change. So I wanted to make that hearing one that showed leadership from the generation to come. In so many ways, they're ahead of us on this issue. And I wanted to make sure that it had a very strong bipartisan, message to it. And we were able to accomplish that. It was wonderful to meet her, and she continues on, and it was exciting. So great challenges, great opportunities. We are the epicenter in terms of the effects of this, but we can become the hub in terms of research and job creation surrounding this.
Great. Susan Richards asks, I am worried about the status of childcare in our state. As an educator who's worked in early childhood systems since the 1970s, it seems like we're having the same discussions about childcare and its place in our country in the 2020s that we were having in the 1970s. The pandemic has exposed how fragile our childcare system is, with both families with young children and the childcare providers who care for them not getting the support and respect they need and deserve. What are your thoughts on this, and what are your suggestions for solutions?
Well, this is an important question, and it's one that's been ongoing. This has been a problem in our country for decades, and we've been slow in dealing with it compared to other countries. And it hurts our economy. It makes it very difficult on families going forward, and particularly there's an affordability question attached to it. Now, COVID-19 and the pandemic has taken this existing problem that was already a serious problem, and it's just really just tore open our inadequacies in dealing with this. And we've seen during this pandemic a 47% increase in costs of childcare. So this becomes a continuing problem, and we're really getting to see the effects of it to the extreme in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. But in reacting to this, the House, who put together every initiative, frankly, in the vacuum of this administration in how to counter the effects of COVID-19, even beyond the healthcare effects, We move forward in dealing with this, and we realize part of this will be the need to develop better childcare. So we put $3.5 billion in the CARES Act through the Child Care Development Block Grant, and that was there to deal with an immediate need, not long-term, an immediate. Even that was inadequate. We put in the HEROES Act another $100 billion, which we're hoping to get a resolution on as talks continue, as this goes on today. And it's more important than ever, given the schooling differences, hybrid schools. There's, some schools are full-time, some students in some communities, one child will be in school, the other will be at home. There's different hours and juggling and not enough home care. And one of the real sticking points right now, this is happening as we speak, and the differences of the plan that we're fighting for relates to funding for childcare. We want to put tax credits in for childcare. We want to increase the personal exemption tax, but also targeted monies there for tax credits surrounding childcare, so it's more affordable and that's more available. We put in funds to try and help fund childcare. So there's personnel. One of the biggest problems surrounding this issue is the ability to attract and retain adequate childcare. When I was a DA before, just as a note, how serious this can be, so many of the cases we had were the result of single moms many times where they would not be able to afford or access childcare, and they would have to go to alternatives with people that weren't checked. There was no Corey check, there was no background check on the people, and so much of the sexual assaults on children and things came from these people that weren't qualified to screen to be a provider. And that's the reluctance of people to go ahead and entrust their child with that. So this has been a problem. The COVID-19 crisis has just made it worse and really made people more aware of the problem. Our actions to deal with it have been critical, but it's not this can't stop at a time when we get past, mercifully, when we get past this pandemic. This has got to be an issue we deal with. If we're going to have a strong economy going forward, if we're going to give people the opportunity to enter the workforce that couldn't otherwise, and we know that more in our district than in many, we're going to have to make sure that we have plans ongoing. And that's why we're fighting right now, not just for the immediate period of time for child care tax credits, but beyond that. Important question that really isn't addressed, but it's one of the major stumbling blocks right now in the stimulus negotiations. Thank you for asking that question.
Next question comes from Mary Splain. Given that the U.S. Supreme Court will likely strike down the Affordable Care Act, what plans are Massachusetts representatives making to reinstitute the universal health care that we have at the state level before the ACA? Can you assure Massachusetts residents that our state law will be upheld and ready to go when the Supreme Court decision comes down? Those of us with pre-existing conditions who are protected by the current law cannot afford to spend months and months without coverage while our representatives figure it out. We need a plan in place now. Thank you. Part of that, right, is actually my work and our work at the legislative level.
I was going to give you a chance.
I mean, my understanding of this, and I'll let Bill elaborate, but right, that we have, so the existing law in Massachusetts would still be in play. So all those protections that came under our the healthcare program, what some call Romney Care, I think it should be called Patrick Care because he implemented it. Those would all stay. So there need to be some technical changes in the law that we could make swiftly from a state perspective, but largely that those protections would remain in place. What would likely be challenged is the expanded Medicare rather Medicaid, the expanded Medicaid protections that come through the ACA. But I'm sure Bill has a lot of work that's being done on the federal level and Congress thinking about what they're going to do to respond both to this potential decision and also to really expand healthcare access under a Biden administration.
Yeah, well, Julian, the law will remain, but and I think many people are under the assumption that, well, if this is struck down and it appears what they haven't been able to do through Congress in striking it down, or in their early efforts in the court, is now in place. They will be successful on moving forward with a new justice. That's a given. That would tip the balance that was 5-4 one way to 5-4 the other way, despite what the nominee has said, that it's clear where she's coming from, given her past statements and actions. And we'll be left without a plan. Ever since I got elected, the Republicans have tried. I've given up counting, but I gave up counting, I think, when it was reached 70 or 80 different legislative efforts to do away with the Affordable Care Act. But what they couldn't do in Congress, they're now trying to do through the courts. And that's serious. And that's really enraged people. I'm furious that, that they're set to take it up November 10th. And so they're rushing to deal with this. They set this nominee forward while 10 states were actually voting in this election after delaying for a year almost Merrick Garland's appointment from even having a hearing. So they've been wanting to do this. The effect on Massachusetts, let's not kid ourselves. The law will remain, but we're left with, frankly, a hole so big, I don't think the state can fill it. The projections are pretty serious. Over 20 million Americans will lose their health insurance and have it right now. It's projected that 375,000 Massachusetts residents, and we're the best state in the whole country in insuring people. 375,000 Massachusetts people are likely to lose their coverage. And the state stands to lose $2.4 billion in federal funds. Now, this is a state that, Julian, they're looking at a $6 billion deficit now in the midst of this pandemic. They're not going to be able to have $2.4 billion more to try and plug a hole. And it's not just the pre-existing condition coverage that's there. It's not just coverage of children under 26 being able to be under your policy. It's just not making it illegal to charge women more than men just because they're a woman in their coverage. And it's not spoken to enough. The big issue in our district that the essential healthcare protections under the Affordable Care Act include medical and behavioral treatment for the opioid addiction problems that we have. All that would be lost. In Medicare, seniors and prescription drug coverage are going to be caught because the filling of the Medicare donut hole would likely be gone. So all these things will happen. And Mass Health, which very aggressively and successfully was put into place to maximize federal funding and to provide coverage that I think we only had 2.5% of the whole Commonwealth without insurance. That's not going to be able to be maintained. So the law, as you mentioned, Julian, will continue forward, but the ability to function under that law won't be. And I'm afraid there'll be an influx of junk policies that come onto the marketplace, which they've been pushing for quite some time, and they won't have that essential healthcare protections in it. And it's interesting for some of the conservative Republicans that are so anxious to repeal this, they're so anxious to repeal the mandate. Think about it. When the coverage is not there, not only do people lose their access to healthcare affordably, but in our society, we don't leave people, bleeding in the hospital doorsteps. We give them coverage. And who pays for that coverage? And before the Affordable Care Act, in a typical family policy, about a third of that was paid to pay for people who didn't have insurance. And a lot of young people rolled the dice and said, I'm invincible. They would get sick, get a car accident, they wouldn't have insurance, and the rest of us would pay for it. So I don't understand their philosophy in that regard. I don't know where they're coming from. Never could understand it. But in all this time, they're saying they're going to come up with a better plan. That's been 10 years. The president has said, once elected, he'll come up with a much better plan. He still doesn't have one. He's still promising one. He said, we'll see it after the election. This is serious. And to have this occur in the midst of the worst health crisis in over a century in our country is immoral and disgraceful.
Our next question is from Megan Perry. How do you intend to help with the affordable housing shortage to help communities with their struggle against unfriendly 40B projects that use outdated 40B law so that private developers can make a huge profit at the cost to the community? Again, probably more of a local state question, but affordable housing and housing issues certainly have always been on urgent on Nantucket and ever more so now in COVID-19.
I agree, Julian, and it is local and state mostly, but the problem of housing is one that the federal government has a big place in, I believe. And indeed, the COVID-19 crisis has again showed us, really, it's taken so many of our issues, the soft underbelly of many of the things that we have as a country for food security, healthcare security, economic opportunity. All those things have been laid bare by this crisis, showing the points that we haven't dealt with effectively and demonstrating what happens and how fragile they are. Housing is one of them. We've dealt in the CARES Act trying to deal with the crisis issues with a 4-month moratorium in terms of eviction filings with its federal financing. We've worked at trying to deal with the payment gap that people are going through with stipends and stimulus money, unemployment money, making sure that people can afford. And the research has shown amazingly too that people, the meager money they have, which they could easily just forget about meeting rent obligations or mortgage obligations, people are meeting those obligations, even exceeding what people had anticipated given their shortfall of money. They still feel they're still acting responsibly. They're trying to deal with this crisis brought on to them through no fault of their own. And we also are dealing with homeless assistance monies as well, giving that money not just in federal programs, but freeing it up for local governments so that they can make their own plans. We're also dealing with concentrating on low income individuals who are more vulnerable, trying to target those in particular. Again, an issue of dispute in this latest stimulus bill. We're trying to make sure that low income heat money is there. And the people affected mostly by that are seniors, and making sure that that won't tip the scales where people can't afford to stay in their homes anymore. So we're meeting the crisis. We're also with the infrastructure bill, the moving forward bill that we have in terms of infrastructure. We've addressed the need for affordable housing as part of that bill. And that housing is going to be energy efficient and going forward, and be rehabilitation and dealing with a lot of the green issues in that respect. So that's going to be included, and I'm optimistic we're going to have a massive infrastructure bill with a new administration, because we're going to have to move to the stage in this pandemic of recovery, of economic recovery. And I think we're going to do it in a very smart way, a forward-thinking way, a way that deals with new technologies, deals with our energy crisis, climate change, and new jobs, good jobs. And this will be part of it. Housing will be part of what we have planned in that regard. So we're dealing with a crisis now. In our district in particular, in the Cape and in Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, we have another problem that is very difficult to deal with, but it shows the intersection of environmental issues with economic issues, and how it just affects so many other issues, including housing. One of the problems we have in the Cape and the two islands is this, that there's just limitations where we can build. There aren't as many sites there because of the groundwater problem. We're under suit right now, still with the Conservation Law Foundation. We're dealing with groundwater issues because of the nature of our district, the way it permeates. It's sandy, the creation of that. It's fragile. We have a sole source aquifer, which, you know, if that ever is contaminated, we're in so much difficulty. But that environmental limitation really hinders our ability to deal with housing too. In the town I live in Bourne, we've had two major affordable housing expansions. It's good to see. Haskell's done a great job of trying to leverage that, but we have to do more. And we have to do it smartly. But that is a huge priority, not just stopgap meeting a crisis here during the pandemic, but addressing the issue that's a longstanding issue going forward. So again, the people asking these questions, they're asking among the most fundamentally important questions and the challenges we have facing our region and our country in that respect.
Sandy Walsh asks, what is your position on massage therapists and body workers being considered essential workers along with chiropractors?
Yeah, a lot of those designations vary from state to state in job classification. You know, you might want to address here in Massachusetts a little bit more, Julian, too.
A lot of state questions, yeah.
I know. Well, there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
That's what's important about working together. But honestly, as a general classification, I guess my opinion, although we don't rule on these things all federally, is that a lot of them don't reach the clinical side. So they're not, you know, usually carried under that. And I know you have your own business, and I hope you're surviving in the very difficult times in your business, Sandy. I know how difficult it must be getting through this time for you. You know, I'm a very big believer. I've had disc problems in my own personal life dealing with that, and I understand the value of this. I understand the value of how massage therapy, deep massage, those things they're not only important in terms of a person's quality of life, but they can often have people navigate through and work through alternatives that aren't as attractive and may cost more money. So I think one thing we have to look at long-term when we look at healthcare issues, there are businesses and professions like this that actually save money. And I think we should begin to look at some of those businesses and professions differently, because if people can save very expensive surgical care and be able to move forward, that's a plus for all of us, and it saves us money.
Question from Stephen Watson. What will you do to preserve our well-established checks and balances of government so as to dissuade those who favor packing the court, ending the filibuster rule, and adding 2 more states?
Well, I know the question is partly the result of the outrageous activity that we've seen with the courts. I can tell you personally, you know, I was furious. I was disappointed, all of the above, when they wouldn't allow Merrick Garland even to have a hearing. And the rationale for that, almost a year out, well, it's too close to the election. We should see who wins and allow them that opportunity. Lindsey Graham, who just was chairing this, I don't know how to describe the hearing. It was just a 3-act play, you know, where we knew the beginning, we knew the ending, and people were going through the motions. Even he just said, he's on tape, you know, hold me to my words. If the primary season is upon us and we're starting, then we shouldn't do this. Well, 10 states already had people voting in the general election during this process. 10 states already voting. So the hypocrisy and the outrage of that not only prompts, I think, this question, but a lot of soul searching. Some response has been, well, what are we going to do about it? In the short term, there's not much we can do. They will have their way in terms of the court. But it really brings us to a moment, I think that's an important moment, because the alternatives that are there are available under the Constitution. We didn't always have the numbers we did. We always didn't have the same, restrictions or lack of restrictions on service. I think it's a time when the dust settles here to really have a discussion. I think it's important to do that. I think people have lost their faith in the integrity of the court because it's political. It's always been political, way back to John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. It's always been political, but not to the extent that it is now. And we've got to do our best to lessen the politics that surround it. There are things to be considered. And I do think we should have a discussion. We should be led by scholars and judicial experts, trying to take the discussion away from the partisanship as much as possible. But we've seen how the confidence in the process has broken down. And I think we have an obligation to really look into how we can restore some of that. Now, the oversight issue is a broad one. We led with a clip on Mike Pompeo and the way this administration just follows the president. The oversight function of Congress has been illegally thwarted. Subpoenas aren't being honored. Witnesses are told not to testify in defiance. Documents aren't being turned over for investigations. And a lot of those investigations are serious. They surround our national security, our intelligence network. They surround our healthcare issues. They surround tax issues. And it's been thwarted. Inspector generals, a process of oversight that was put into place to take politics out of the system. Nonpartisan inspector generals. He's fired them. President Trump has fired them, thrown them out, and tried to replace them. And the people he's replaced, he's fired. He expects them to be rubber stamps. He expects them to do whatever he tells them to do. He expects them to violate the law. And if you abide by the law and fail to violate the law after he's pressuring you to do it. So these are the issues that we're dealing with. I just know that this is a constitutional crisis area in terms of our not allowing congressional oversight, taking reforms like inspector generals and making them, neutering them. I think that that's an issue. In terms of statehood, I have voted, and this House did pass, to move forward in statehood for Washington, D.C. Long overdone, with budgets larger than many of our states, with citizens that are not represented, and that's already moved forward with the House. So I think another great example of a critical crisis-related issue is this oversight issue, and I'm just pleased at this meeting. I mean, we're talking about national issues of enormous historical significance, as well as issues that just affect us so much in our daily lives, and we'll continue forward in that. I don't know how much time we have, Julian, but I'd say this, that you and I both know how unique Nantucket is. We know how the economy's just centered on, tourism, hospitality. We haven't touched on the H-2B issue or the J-1 issue that allows small businesses to be able to function year round. I would say this, I've started a coalition, bipartisan one, and led the charge to create an orderly process. Small businesses, even before this pandemic, didn't know what to do. They couldn't get a business plan together. They didn't know how many employees they could access. They didn't know how many hours they could be open. They didn't know if they could open at all. This administration has changed the rules 3 times, going from lotteries and people are scrambling with no policy, nothing, leaving these businesses just on their own, unable to deal and function as a business. They needed J1 workers. They needed H2B workers. And here's some encouraging news, I think. Prior to this administration, it's been difficult in this area, but President Bush and President Obama would work with Congress and raise the cap on returning workers. There's solutions to deal with this issue. It shouldn't be lumped into this president's very warped views about immigration. These are more small business issues, I believe. I think with a different administration, we're going to do 2 things. We're going to be able to move and deal with this issue in particular and have some predictability. What I want is for people to know for the next 3 or 5 years for business planning, these are the rules. This is what I can count on. So we're going to move forward with that as a priority. The island is also has access issues. I think, you know, we talked about the Steamship Authority in terms of some of the natural phenomenon, the dredging, but the COVID-19 crisis has resulted in great difficulty in terms of revenues for the Steamship Authority. We were able to access CARES Act money and money that we changed the system on commuter rail so that we, commuter ferry service, so that we have over $12 million we could apply to that and keep the ship running. We worked with the airline companies like Cape Air to make sure they could function and have air access. And we worked to make sure the infrastructure's there as well. With Nantucket Airport, the CARES Act put $6.2 million in place to keep the operation of that airport in place too. Most people didn't recognize that. And we've had in this summer almost $20 million come, so we can do the infrastructure work and replace the taxiway. Most people, we know it, but most people don't realize in Massachusetts, the second busiest airport in Massachusetts is Nantucket, after Logan Airport. So, these are real problems unique to the island. We'll continue to work on them. And if your questions going forward are ones of national scope, international scope, or local scope, I'll welcome them. And I trust they'll be as good as the questions we've had this evening.
Yeah. So speaking of this evening, we want to be respectful of folks' time, and so many people are taking time off of other remote work. So we're gonna wrap up our conversation here. I think this is a good way to end, Bill. Talking about how some of these very big federal programs and initiatives, how they have an impact here on island and how they really want to make a difference. I know we had a few questions in the chat that weren't answered, and Jim is going to follow up individually with each of you. I want to thank certainly the Congressman's team for pulling this together and making it happen. I want to thank all the islanders who joined us this evening, especially the folks who asked questions, and certainly want to thank Congressman Keating for giving us an hour to sink our teeth into island issues, talk about what we need to do to meet the moment. Always a pleasure to work with him in partnership with him and his team.
I want to again thank you for moderating this so well. You've got a real future.
I know when I retire from this, I'll go do
take your
moderation.
Stay here for a while, do the good work you're doing in the Senate. But after that, you got a great future. I can see you now. It could be Morning Julian.
Morning Julian. Hey, it pays a lot better than our line of work, so I'll check it out.
And let's hope that this Thanksgiving that's coming, let's hope Joe Biden comes back to Nantucket as he does almost every year, right? We want to make sure. I'll tell you this, when we're talking to this administration, we can talk to Joe Biden directly and say, Nantucket, their needs. So I'm anxious to be able to do that. And I hope he spends his holidays in Nantucket the way he has most years. And I hope that special relationship exist. And here I go being partisan, but even if it's beyond partisan now with a new President Biden. So thank you.
Here's to that. Great. Thanks, everyone. Take good
Thank you.
care.
Thanks.